So I'm going to talk to you guys today about amphibians and reptiles. Mainly going to talk about frogs and turtles. So those are each individual species within those larger groups. Let me just get this going so you can see some pictures. All right. So you guys want to unmute for a second, I might have some questions for you and you can answer. What types of animals are these guys?
Frogs.
Frogs. How do we know that they're frogs?
Because of their look.
Because of
Well,
their
not
look.
just that, because of the webbed feet mainly. And
Webbed feet, that's a good one. And do they look furry?
no,
No, just kind of
the
slimy wet.
slime-like skin. It looks slime-like, and the skin color is usually pale to blend in with their habitat.
Yeah, they want to blend in and they have wet skin. So that's going to be important for us when we talk about where they're going to go in the winter. So we have two different types of frogs here in BC. We have frogs that are invaders and frogs that they are native. Does anyone know what it means to be an invader?
No. Somewhere else around the world.
They came from somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
A native frog is a
Like,
frog
for
that
example,
lives
the
here.
Burmese python.
A Burmese
invaded the
python, if it lives
Everglades.
here, is an invader, right? But it has a home where it's supposed to be, where it is native. So we can tell the frogs here in BC if they're invaders or native by looking at their ears. Do frogs have a sticky outy bit on the side of their head like we do? That's where their ear is?
No.
They don't. Their ear is just right on the side of their face. Can you guys see the circle behind his eye right here? That circle is the frog's ear. And here in BC, if a frog has a big ear, that means it's an invader. And if it has a little ear, can you see the little ear on this frog?
Wow.
If it has a little ear, that means it's a native frog. So we can look at the ears of frogs here in BC and we can tell what they're invaders or not. So only works in BC. If we go somewhere else, it won't work the same way. So here we have an invasive frog. This guy is called a bullfrog. And here we have a native frog. So in BC, we have two different types of invader frogs. Can you see the ears on these frogs?
Yes.
They're really big. So that lets us know both of these types of frogs are invaders. And this is our bullfrog. So he's really big. He can eat anything that fits in his mouth. So this guy can eat all of our native frogs and can even eat birds and mice. So he eats a lot of different things. And this guy here is a green frog. We can tell he's an invader because he has a big ear. And why do you think we call him a green frog?
Is he green?
Because he's green. He's got these big green lips.
The scientific name is Ranico mutans.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh? So these guys are both invaders. They live on the other side of Canada, but they moved here by people moving them around. So now you guys know enough about frogs and just those tiny little bit of time to tell me whether these are invaders or not. What about this one right here? Is he an invader?
Invasive.
Yep.
Invasive, right? Who can tell me what kind of frog he is?
Bullfrog.
Bullfrog, right? What about
Bullfrog.
this one in the center top?
It isn't invasive.
Not
It isn't
invasive. Yeah.
invasive? It is a native frog, right? So if it's not invasive, we call it a native frog. And we can see his tiny little ears right here. So this guy is called a red-legged frog because he's got these big red legs. He's pretty cool. What about this guy? Is he invader or native?
Invader.
Invasive.
Yeah, he's invasive because he has a big ear and he's got these big green lips. So what kind of frog is he?
Green frog.
A green frog.
Green frog, right. So he's an invader green frog. What about this one down here?
That's native.
Not invasive.
Not invasive, a native frog, right? Because he's got a tiny little ear. Now this guy is a really special frog to me because this is one I work on a lot. It's called an Oregon spotted frog. So he loves to stay in the water. He has shorter legs than like the red-legged frog because he likes to stay in the water. He doesn't really jump around too much, so he doesn't need to have really big legs. What about this guy in the center here, is he invader or native?
Native.
Native.
He's native, right? He has a small ear. We can hardly see it.
Is
right
it
back
a
there.
leopard frog?
It isn't a leopard frog. It's not even really a frog. Who can tell me what they think that is?
Oh, it's a toad. It's a toad.
It's a toad, right? How do we tell a toad from a frog?
Toads are warty.
You can tell toad from a frog because toads are usually greenish and frogs are usually more brown.
All different colors. This guy we can tell because he's kind of
And toads are somewhat
rounder
bigger.
than he is long, and he's got all these bumps, but he's missing something that frogs have. And someone mentioned it before when we were talking about their feet. Someone gave me a clue about frogs' feet, and there's something that this toad doesn't have that frogs do.
Webbed
What if
feet?
Webbed feet.
between his toes? Is there anything between his toes?
Webbed feet.
No.
Yeah, toads don't have webbed feet. So toads like to spend a lot of time hopping around on the ground. They don't really love swimming a ton, so they don't have webbed feet. Now this guy is a spadefoot toad. Spadefoot toads are really, really cool because they live in the desert. So if you're a frog and you need to live in a really, really dry place, you have to have a lot of cool adaptations that you can stay alive. So these toads like to bury under the ground. And they're called spadefoot toads because they have a little fingernail on the back of their foot right here, and they use that to dig down into the ground. When it gets too dry, they go down to where it's still wet, and they make themselves a slime jacket, and they can stay down there for a long time and wait till it rains again. So that's one of their cool adaptations for the winter. They can use that in the summer when it's really dry. So a lot of these animals have really cool adaptations for different weather, even cold. What about this guy right here? Do we think he's an invasive?
Invasive.
Invasive.
Invasive, right? He has a ginormous eardrum. So what kind of invasive do you think he is? We talked about bullfrogs and green frogs. Which one do you think he looks like?
Green frog.
Green frog.
He does look like a little bit like a green frog because he has this lip, but he's actually a bullfrog. So a lot of the frogs we have here in BC can be different colors, even though they're the same frog, because this guy down here, he doesn't look a whole lot like this one up here, does
It's
he?
the brown variant of the American
Yeah,
version.
he's got brown, and they can actually change colors a little bit. So depending on the weather and warmth, he can change colors. So it makes it difficult for us to tell our frogs just by looking at their colors here in BC. Not like down in the tropics where we might have a bright green frog and a bright blue frog, and they're really easy to tell apart. All right, so you guys got those, but we also have a lot of other amphibians. Amphibians aren't just
There are
frogs,
also
right? You
newts,
can tell me some other
salamanders, and
amphibians.
Sicilians.
Sorry?
Newts, salamanders, and Sicilians.
And Sicilians, right. We have a wonderful amphibian person here. So here you see we have these guys called long-toed salamanders. Have you guys seen those before?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, sometimes if you have a wood pile in your yard, they'll be hanging out under there. So they like to go anywhere where it's a little bit moist. And these guys, northwestern salamanders. Has anyone seen these guys before?
Yeah.
Yes. Maybe.
Yeah, some of you have. They have these kind of big googly eyes, and they have these folds down the side. It looks like ribs. Sometimes can make them look a little like they might be hungry and skinny, but it's not. That's just how their body is. They're fine. And this guy is one of my favorites, the rough-skinned newt.
You guys saw one. I have a favorite salamander.
Do you? What's your favorite salamander?
I really like the fire salamanders.
Fire salamanders are pretty cool.
They're native to Germany.
My favorite
Awesome.
salamanders are the Instatinas.
So this rough-skinned newt, can we see his orange belly under there? If you're an animal and you have a bright color, what does that usually mean?
Poisonous.
It means they're poisonous.
Poisonous, right? So this rough-skinned newt is a little bit poisonous. So if he's out in the wild and we come across him and we scare him, he'll flip onto his back, roll into a circle, and show us his orange belly to let us know that we shouldn't eat him because he's a little poisonous. Pretty cool. So what's the difference between a newt and a salamander? They look kind of the same. Long body, long tail.
Newts are a bit more rough-skinned and
It can be.
a little poisonous. And salamanders have larger heads and usually have a colorful stripe on their body.
Sometimes, yeah. So newts and salamanders are kind of like frogs and toads. Newts are like toads, they spend more time on land, and salamanders are like frogs, they spend more time in the water.
Yeah, salamanders are aquatic.
Salamanders love to be in the water, yeah. So one of the things that we do for frogs is we do something called head starting, which is like frog school. So if you are a frog in the wild and you lay your eggs that look kind of like jello, what do you think is something that might happen to those eggs before they get a chance to be tadpoles and frogs? What are some threats to eggs in the wild?
They can be eaten.
They can definitely be eaten by invasive frogs,
by
snakes,
invasive frogs, for sure.
and also occasionally by raptors.
By raptors, yeah. All
and
sorts of birds
coyotes,
that eat frog
foxes.
eggs. What if the frog lays her eggs and then it gets really hot and dry out?
It usually just disintegrates.
Well, frogs usually lay their eggs near water.
They do, but sometimes the water can dry up, and if the water dries up, then the eggs won't survive. What if it rains a lot? Do you think these frog eggs love to go swimming in really deep water? No, they need like shallow water. So we want to make sure that we protect the frogs by making sure that nothing bad happens to them when they're tiny little eggs and tadpoles. So we take them into these tubs, and each one of them holds some frogs. Those are like their classrooms where they grow up nice and safe and they learn how to be frogs. Yeah. So at the end of summer, we get the tiny little frogs like the picture up here. So who knows what it's called when a tadpole, which is a tiny baby frog, becomes an adult frog?
Metamorphosis.
Metamorphosis, right? Because they're completely different animals. They go from being a vegetarian, so a tadpole eats mostly algae and plants growing in the water, into a carnivore. So these frogs eat insects. So they have to change completely from one type of creature to another. And then we let them go. Before we let them go, we give them a little mark. It's like a frog tattoo, and it goes on their toe. And that lets us tell them apart from the other frogs that are in the wild. So these little frogs right here, they're going to get a yellow and blue mark on their toe that year. And that lets us know what year that they were born too. And before we let them go, we want to make sure we weigh them and we know how long they are. Why does it matter how big you are if you're a frog? Why do we care if we release nice big frogs?
To see if you'll survive in the wild.
To see if they'll survive, right? The bigger you are, the more likely you are to survive, and the less likely you are to get eaten by one of those big bullfrogs. So we want to make sure that they have a chance to survive. So we'll get their weight and their length, and then we'll give them their little foot dot. And then once we let them go, we follow them around. Have you guys seen on TV, maybe in person, you've seen an animal with a tracking device on them, like a shark with a big sticker on his back, or maybe a sea turtle with something stuck to his back? Have you seen that? Sometimes we'll put a collar on like a lion, and that lets us know how to follow them around. But with frogs, they don't really have a neck. We can't put a collar on them, and we can't stick something to them because they're slimy. So we have to put the tracker in them. That's what this little bump is on the back of the frog.
YLLO6.
So that's a little thing that lets us know exactly where the frog is. And we need to follow them because we need to know that they have what they need, not just the day that we let them go, but their whole life. So we need to know that they have a place to go to lay their eggs, and especially a place to go for the winter. So we want to make sure that we have a nice pond that is deep, that's going to let these frogs survive over. What happens all the way to the bottom and there's frogs in there? The frogs won't survive. So we need to make sure that we are able to keep them nice and safe. Can you guys hear me? I keep getting this sign that says my internet connection is unstable.
It broke up a couple times, but
We're all right? Okay.
And by the way, about the salamanders, the fire salamanders don't actually go in the fire, but
When you light a campfire,
because
they like come out of the logs because salamanders can get killed by fire.
Yeah, they don't like fire very much.
Yeah.
So another thing that we can do, another thing that we can do is build them habitat. So sometimes there are frogs and they need a place to live. And this is what the people are doing in these pictures. So they're coming in and digging a big hole. And if that hole won't hold water, they'll put this special fabric in the bottom, and that will make a new habitat for the frogs where there wasn't one before. And that can be really important for the frogs in the area who maybe their other ponds dry up. And so they need to have a place to go that stays wet all year long so that they have a place to hibernate. And sometimes there's ponds that used to be there and they're not anymore. Sometimes we drain the field so that we can grow food there, or sometimes the habitat changes and we can help by putting a habitat back where it used to be. So it's really easy for us here in the Fraser Valley to do that because our land is really suited to holding water. It really wants to hold the water all the time, so it makes it pretty easy for us to have it hold water again. So that way we're able to make lots of new habitat for these frogs, make sure they have nice places to overwinter. So if a frog is in the pond down here where I'm sitting on a log and we built this pond, if it freezes over, how does the frog survive?
He goes under the pond.
Goes into torpor.
Goes down to the bottom, right?
Frogs have gills like fish.
But they have
to
gills when
survive
they're
the
tadpoles,
winter.
but when they're frogs, they need to breathe air. They need to use their
Salamanders and
lungs.
Frogs have gills like fish, so that they can still stay alive while they're under the water during winter.
They do when they're tadpoles, but as adults, they don't have their gills anymore. So they need to make sure that they stay in a good spot. They need to make sure that the water has lots of oxygen in it, because when they're stuck under the ice, they can actually breathe through their skin. So they can breathe through their skin enough so that they can stay alive for all the way to the next year. And if it's cold enough, they don't even need to eat, because their body gets so used to being cold, it doesn't need to eat anymore. So they have adaptations to being able to stop eating and to be able to just breathe through their skin, so they don't need to use their mouth to breathe anymore. All right, you guys have any questions about frogs? We can have more questions later too if you remember, but if you have any right now, we can answer them.
You know what? We saw a frog in a pond one day.
Did you?
Yeah. We had
Maybe
to
he was just stopping by.
It was a Pacific tree frog.
It
was Pacific tree frog. They're very cute.
Yes.
Do you guys have any more turtle questions, or you want to think of them for later? We think for later? All right. So next we're going to talk about a turtle. Is a turtle an amphibian?
No, it's a reptile.
It's a reptile. How do we know it's a reptile?
Mainly because it doesn't have webbed feet. Its skin isn't slimy, and reptiles, they actually usually have scales.
Yeah, so reptiles have scales. They can have webbing between their toes.
Yeah.
But they have scales. That's one of the big differences. What does a turtle egg look like? Does it look like it's made of jelly?
No.
No.
No, turtle eggs look kind of like chicken eggs. They have a shell on the outside, and they're a little bit squishy. They're not exactly the same as a chicken egg. So we're going to talk a little bit about turtles, and the turtles are reptiles, and we'll go a little bit into how they breed, how they hatch, and then we'll talk a bit about their adaptations to the winter, which are pretty cool. So this is a habitat where turtles live. So this is a pretty deep lake. And in front of me, I'm the person in the picture here, there's a nest. So turtle has come up and laid her eggs on here. Do frogs lay their eggs on beaches?
No.
No, in the water, right? So turtle's got to have a nice beach in order to lay their nest. So she's come up and laid her nest right here. If these eggs are left under the ground, what are some things that might happen to them before they get a chance to hatch and come out of the sand?
They'll probably get broken.
They could get broken, right?
Some of
So
them
someone
might
could run along.
Yeah, they might get broken.
Coyotes.
Yeah, these people who are out here swimming might not know that they're there. They might run on the beach. Maybe a dog comes and digs them up, or a raccoon. Yeah, and the same thing is that can happen to frog eggs, can sometimes happen to turtle eggs. If it rains too much, these eggs could get flooded, and if eggs are flooded, then they won't survive. Or if it gets really, really hot, it can dry the eggs up. So what we're going to do here is just like the frogs, we're going to collect the eggs to keep them safe. and do the same thing, kind of take them to turtle school so that they can grow up nice and safely. So here are some turtle eggs. We can see they have a shell on the outside, kind of like a chicken egg. And each one of them has a little mark on the top and a number. So that lets us track them to see how they do and see how the turtle does when it hatches out. So here's our little baby turtle. Super cute. He has something that he has an adaptation for living in a shell. He has this little thing on the end of his nose. Does anyone know what that is?
A caruncle. It's the turtle's baby tooth that it uses to
The
hatch.
turtle's baby tooth. Yeah, so it's called an egg tooth, and it only uses it for one thing, to get himself out of the egg. Because if you imagine your little turtle in your egg, there's no door knob that you can turn to just come out when you want to. So he has to cut his way. So he uses that little egg tooth, like scissors, to cut himself out. And then shortly after he hatches, it's going to fall off because he's not going to need it again in the rest of his life. So when turtles lay their eggs, they lay their eggs up on the sand. It takes them a long time to incubate or grow. And sometimes turtles here in BC, they'll actually stay in the nest over winter. So what happens is the baby turtles hatch out of their egg, but they don't dig up through the sand, and they stay in their nest with all of their other siblings, and they can actually freeze solid. So these guys are very cool. In the first year of their life, they can freeze completely solid, and in the spring they'll thaw out and climb out of their nest and go to the water. Now it's pretty cool because they can only do that the very first year that they're alive. So tiny, tiny little baby turtles can freeze solid, but an adult turtle, if it freezes solid, it won't survive. So these little tiny baby turtles are super tough and really adapted to being able to live here in North America, where we get cold winters and we might not necessarily want to come out of our nests right away. So these guys are pretty cool. They're pretty tough little critters. So once he comes out, we can see how pretty his belly is. So these guys are called Western painted turtles. Can you guys see why we might call them painted turtles?
Yeah.
They have these really pretty belly patterns, and each turtle has an individual belly pattern. So we can tell them apart by their bellies from as soon as they hatch until they're old turtles. They'll look very, very similar. Not exactly the same, but pretty similar, that we can tell them all apart. So this little turtle here has really pretty belly pattern of red, black, and yellow. And he has this little yellow spot right in the center. Can anyone tell me what they think that is? What's in the center of your belly?
Belly button.
Belly button, right? So this is a turtle's belly button. So when he's inside the
Ooh,
egg,
that's
this is the
cool.
part that's attached to the inside of the egg. And that's how he gets his nutrients. So when he hatches out, it closes up. And over the next couple of weeks, it'll seal up completely, so they won't have any belly button there anymore. So unlike us, they lose their belly button, but they do have one at the very beginning of their life. So we can see how small this turtle is. This is someone's hand holding him here. He's about the size of a loony. So do you think that that shell is going to really be super protective for him when he's that little?
Nope.
No. So a shell is going to protect him a lot when he's older, but it doesn't do a lot when you're still tiny. So his shell is still soft when he hatches, and it's going to harden up over the next couple of months. But he really needs to make sure that he hides. So tiny baby turtles are really good at hiding. You're not going to see them basking and sitting out in the sun very often because they're so vulnerable to getting eaten. They're going to hide pretty well. So it's really hard to see tiny little turtles like this guy in the wild. So we can see how tiny he is here. This one is next to a penny. We don't even use pennies anymore. But he's pretty tiny. So he's going to be vulnerable to a lot of things before he's able to get big enough to use that shell for protection.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep him in captivity. So we're going to keep him nice and safe. So nothing can eat him until he gets to be about 30 grams. So until he gets to be about the size of a Pokemon card. By the time he's that big, not a lot of stuff will eat him. His shell will be nice and strong, and he'll be able to swim away really fast from anything that's trying to catch him. So we're going to keep him nice and safe until he gets that big. And once they get big, can they freeze solid in winter anymore?
Yes.
No.
No, right? They can only do that the first year that they're alive. So if he's going to get nice and big, he's not going to be able to freeze solid. So where do turtles go in the winter?
Hibernation.
They go into like something like a hibernation. Yep. So they go
Well,
down
they
to
go-
the bottom.
They go to the nest.
They go down to the bottom of the pond and they just hang out there, kind of like where the frogs are going to hang out. So they're not going to be able to come to the surface to breathe if it gets icy, and they're not going to eat. But these guys have scales all over their skin. So how are they going to breathe? So these guys are really cool. They can actually breathe through very, very thin parts of their skin. And the thinnest parts of skin on the turtles are around their eyes, in their mouth, and around their bum.
Oh, this way.
So these guys can actually breathe through their skin, but not everywhere like a frog can. So they can breathe enough through their skin in the winter that they can survive without coming to the surface to breathe. But just like a frog, in the summer, they need to come to the surface to breathe. So they can't stay under the water the whole time. Throughout the whole summer, they need to come up once it starts getting warm. So remember we talked about invader frogs? We have an invader turtle here too. And we can tell it's an invader the same way that we can tell a frog is an invader, by looking at his ear.
Oh,
So
listen,
we
why
don't look
did
at the
it-
size of the ear, but we can look at the color of the ear. Can you guys see where the ear is on this turtle?
where's the ear?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of hard because they don't even have a circle like frogs do. But this is where his ear is. It's completely covered by skin and we can't really see it. But this red hat is right where the ear is. And this guy's called a red-eared slider. So we can tell that he's a red-eared slider by looking at his red ears. But we know that those turtles are invaders. So they came here, people brought them as pets. And then when they get tired of having a turtle, sometimes they'll release them to the wild. Now, these guys are turtle bullies. Do you guys know what a bully is?
Yeah.
You know, we learned about bullies
Yeah.
at school and how it's not nice to be a bully, right? And push other people around. Well, these guys are turtle bullies. So they're more aggressive than the painted turtles. And sometimes they could push them off their food or push them off a log into the water. And they get much bigger than our native turtles, the painted turtles. So these guys are people's pets. And so one thing we always encourage people is if you have a red-eared slider as a pet, to keep them as a pet, because they do much better as a pet than they will do in the wild, where they can get sick themselves or where they can bully their local turtles. So these guys are pretty cool, but better as pets than out in the wild.
While we're still on the concept of turtles,
Yeah.
painted turtles, the Western painted turtle is actually endangered, but you are pretty likely to spot one floating on a log.
Yeah. Have you seen one in the wild before?
I've seen them around 2 times.
Yeah. So we work on a project where we release them into the wild. So hopefully very soon you'll start to see them all over the place. And yeah, you're right.
Sadly, they're going extinct.
Yeah, they're not doing super well sometimes. So that's why we have to raise them up and let them go into places where they can survive. Yeah. So
I have seen painted turtles at when I go to camp.
yeah,
It's
where's
like
your camp?
It's called Garden Lake Bible Camp. And we see turtles everywhere
Yeah,
in the pond.
that's cool.
We see we see babies. Like,
Nice.
and one time I was there, we saw them even giving birth,
Laying
raising
their
the
eggs.
eggs. Yeah.
Awesome. Did they have a nice nesting beach?
It's mostly by the cafeteria.
Yeah, like
No.
Sandy?
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
had to
That's cool. They love that. All right, I'm going to turn off my screen so that I can show you some special guests that I have here with me. Can you guys see me now?
Yep.
Yeah, you can see me. All right, I will bring out my special guests. So I have 2 special guests with me. Can you guys see them?
Painted turtles.
They're painted turtles. Right, so these little painted turtles are almost a year old. So they're bigger than a loony, bigger than a toonie. Now, if I can hold them up to the camera so you guys can see, do they have the same belly pattern or different belly pattern?
Different.
They have a different pattern. The
Different.
one on the
okay.
other side has a slightly sharper.
Yeah, one of them, this one over here, his belly is a little bit lighter than this one over here. But that's just difference, just like we're all different. But we can see the pattern is quite different too, isn't it? So these guys can live well over 60 years old. And if we catch them in 60 years and they happen to be these two guys, then we can tell them apart and we can say, hey, I remember you.
Could a painted turtle grow about this big?
It's hard for me to see your hands, but a female painted turtle will grow about the size of a dinner plate. And a male painted turtle will be a little bit smaller.
So
why
can
do
they
you
grow at least 1 foot long?
These guys can't go quite a foot long, but almost. So why would a female turtle have to be bigger than a male turtle?
You need more organs to lay an egg.
To lay eggs, right? So they have to have all the eggs.
And also
inside of
to
them.
protect their young.
Well, they don't really protect their
They
young.
don't
They lay
protect
the
their
eggs
young.
and then they let them hatch on their
Now I
own.
remember. Sea turtles and painted turtles. The female turtles, they just go straight back to the ocean or the lake where they actually live. And then the turtles actually have to make their way out to the ocean. I'm just saying this on the concept of sea turtles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sea
Like
turtles
the
work a little
leatherback.
bit differently because sea turtles do something called an arabata where all the eggs hatch at once.
Yeah.
And these turtles, their eggs hatch slowly over time, which means they don't really draw a lot of predators. If you're a predator waiting for a sea turtle or a painted turtle to hatch out of the ground, you'll be waiting a really long time. So these guys don't really have predators like that. There's a question now that I'm not on my presentation anymore. I can see there's a question here from Finley who asked if frogs are smart. Well, frogs don't have a really big brain like people do, but they are a different kind of smart. They have really, really good behaviors that are embedded in them. So frogs know exactly how to frog all the time. They know where they need to go, how to lay their eggs, how to run from predators. All those things are built into them. So they're not really good at math, but they're good at being a frog.
Yeah.
And someone asked here, are all alien frog species invasive? So lots of countries have different species of frogs that are invasive. Bullfrogs are one of the most invasive species in the world. So they are invasive in a lot of different places that people have accidentally or on purpose moved them to. So bullfrogs are invasive in a lot of places, but they are native in some places. And where they're native, sometimes they're not doing so good. So just because a frog is an invader in one spot doesn't mean that it's not really important in another spot. Right? Oh, can you guys see the turtle? I took him out of the frame a little bit. Do you guys have any more questions?
Can we see the habitat?
Can we see the habitat? Well, I don't have the habitat with me. I just have the turtle.
Oh yeah. I want to see the habitat.
Could you go big screen so we could see that turtle better?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Can we see?
I don't know if it.
And turtles grow out of their shells.
Can turtles go out of their shells? No,
Yeah.
they can't.
Oh
nice.
yeah.
There. Is that better?
Hey,
So the turtle is attached to his shell.
cute. That
So
looks
his spine, if you guys reach behind yourself, can you feel your spine?
Yeah.
Yeah, so his spine is attached to the shell. It runs right down here. So he can't come out of his shell, otherwise he wouldn't have any bones. So he has to grow with his shell.
Mhm.
So you can see the plates on the back. Can you see all the different segments on his shell?
Yes.
So as he grows on the lines. And as he grows, the different shell scoots will pop off. As he doesn't need them anymore, as he grows a new one underneath, he'll shed his shell.
Whoa.
And that's how he grows.
Whoa.
Wow.
Oh. That's pretty.
How often do they shed their shell?
It depends on how they're eating and how fast they're growing. in the summer when these guys are growing fairly quickly, usually about once a month, all the scutes will start to pop off. This guy's scutes are getting a little bit loose. Actually, can you see this one right here? Not quite ready to come off yet, but it comes off and it's clear.
Oh,
Can you see it?
kind of like a snake scale.
Yeah, just like a snake scale.
Yeah.
So these guys can't shed it all in one piece like a snake can, but they shed
Yeah.
one scoot at a time.
That was cool. Did you see that?
Pretty cool. Can you see him looking at you? His head's not quite all the way in.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can frogs shed their skin?
Frogs shed their skin, definitely. Yep. They shed it. They usually shed it all in one piece, but they definitely shed their skin. Sometimes they even eat it.
Ooh.
I knew that already.
Does that mean you can find like a frog skin, like a snake skin out in the forest maybe sometimes?
Yeah, you can. And it even, most of the time you recognize the feet because you can see the little foot shape.
Right. Wow. I had no idea.
It's pretty fragile though. We see them a lot in the breeding program because we have them enclosed in a special area. So it's a lot easier to find them. It'd probably be pretty rare to find one in the wild because it would probably get disturbed really quickly. It's such a very thin layer of skin that if anything swims by, it's probably just going to disintegrate. But they do. Yeah. And it, yeah, like I said, it's really funny to see the little foot.
Do you have any other questions?
No.
You wonder what?
How do we tell if a turtle is a boy or a girl turtle?
Penis?
What
They
did turtle?
do. So we can tell just by looking at them. So when they have their tail down, he's got his tail out right now. Boys have a longer, wider tail.
Boys have a longer tail.
And we can also tell, well, I know because I hatched this guy out of his egg, is that whether they're a boy or a girl is based on the temperature that we keep them at when they're in the egg. So if we keep them at a warmer temperature, then they're going to become girls. And if we keep them at a colder temperature, they're going to become boys.
What was your question, Mia?
What do they eat?
What do they eat? So turtles, when they're little, they love to eat really fast things, minnows and bugs in the water. So they eat a lot of invertebrates, like insects and stuff. That makes them a carnivore. And as they get bigger, sometimes they get slower and they're not so good at swimming very fast. And then they start to eat more plants. So a turtle can always eat meat if it finds it. But as it gets bigger, it tends to eat more plants because plants can't run away.
So they're omnivores.
They are omnivores. If a turtle finds a dead fish in the water, he's definitely not going to swim by. He's going to eat it no matter how big he is.
Did you know that it depends on how depends on the temperature that turtles are born at. That depends on their gender. So like if it's at a low temperature, it can be like a girl. Or if it's at a more higher temperature, it can be a male turtle. The same goes for many reptiles, like crocodiles.
So the way it works for these turtles is that a higher temperature makes a girl and a lower temperature makes a boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens if we have a really hot summer?
There'll usually be a few more female turtles. A lot more female turtles.
Sometimes it's all girls.
A lot more turtle.
Yeah.
Did you know that all clownfish are born as females, but can change gender to male if it's needed?
Yeah, lots of animals are really cool at that.
Worms don't have genders.
So there is someone's question here. Oh, that I misunderstood, I see. Are all frogs that are introduced here taking over, or there's some that are not affecting anything? So right now we just have bullfrogs are green frogs. Bullfrogs are more of a problem than green frogs because they get much larger. Green frogs are smaller. They don't tend to eat as many of our native amphibians, but they do act as competition. So green frogs lay a lot more eggs than our native species do. So they can outcompete some of our native species in the environment. But green frogs aren't as much of an issue for our native amphibians as bullfrogs are. As far as I'm aware, there have not any other there are not any frogs introduced that have no impact. But there are probably a lot of frogs that have been released at some point that just didn't survive. So if you had a frog that came from any sort of warmer climate or tropical location, if you were to have it as a pet and it would get out, then it just wouldn't survive. So usually we just have issues with animals that are from a semi-reasonably close climate profile to us, or an animal that has a very large climate profile that it can live in. So a red-eared slider is actually native to Central America and Southern US. So they do like it a lot warmer, but they have a very broad range that they can survive in. So red-eared slider turtles can survive here for sure. They don't thrive here, but if they're released, they can survive and impact our local species. Now, recently with our warmer falls that we're having, we're actually starting to see red-eared sliders that can lay their eggs and have those eggs hatch, which has not happened before. Usually what happens with red-eared slider eggs is that if they're laid, they don't actually hatch before winter because of the timing of red-eared slider nesting, and then they don't survive. So the only turtles that we have here until recently were all released pets. There were a lot of them, but they were released pets. But now we're seeing that they can actually start to breed here successfully as well, which just becomes its own separate problem. Yeah, sorry I misunderstood your question, but hopefully that helps. Do you guys have any other questions? I missed any. Oh, someone asked if frogs are active under the ice during the winter. So they don't go completely to sleep. If we disturb them or it starts to warm up, they'll move around a little bit. So they can be seen under the ice moving around, just like turtles. They will kind of scoot around and move a little bit. So we don't, if they get disturbed too much, then they can use up too much energy and get exhausted, but they can move around a little bit under the water. And someone said the pollywog is a term for a juvenile frog. Yeah, it is. So we can call them tadpoles or polywogs. That means the same thing.
What's that?
I don't think I missed anyone else's questions, but if I did, let me know.
Finland from Sapiens?
Someone just asked, is there a program to remove red-eared sliders from the wild? So there isn't any one specific program. We do monitor for our painted turtles, which involves setting traps for them in the wild. They're just capture traps, so they don't hurt the turtles. The turtles just go in them and then they can't get back out. And then we check them and monitor and record information about them before we let them go. So those traps just catch any turtle. They don't care if it's a painted turtle or a slider. So we sometimes catch red-eared sliders in those traps. And if we do, then we take them out and we don't let them go back into the wild. So there isn't any, other than our trapping for monitoring program, there isn't any specific program trying to remove sliders. It's illegal to breed them and to sell them now, so that is helpful. But a lot of turtles have been around for quite a long time. So that will affect the positive things that have been done to stop more turtles from being released are great, but there are still a lot out there. Turtles are really tough and they can live for a super long time. So my dad, who is an old guy now, he remembers actually getting a turtle as a prize at the P&E. So where we get stuffed animals now and cotton candy, they used to give out live turtles. So there are a lot of turtles out there from kids like my dad a long time ago that are still alive. So there's a lot of animals out there. And like I said, now that they're starting to get warm enough that they can breed successfully, we want to make sure that we're trying to make sure that we don't add to that problem by releasing more turtles. Why are turtles cute? I don't know. They just are.
You
I think
put,
Zach
when they're
has his hand
tiny.
up in the corner there.
you put microchips on your turtles?
We do, yeah. So just like the little tag that we saw on the back of the frog, we put them on the turtles as well, but they go inside so we can't see them at all because of the turtle's shell.
Yeah,
But
like
they're in there. Yep, they help them, they help us be able to track them. And it actually helps us too. If someone tries to take the turtles from the wild, it lets us know where they are. And so it lets us know that it was a turtle that was supposed to be in the wild. So that helps with the conservation officers so they know who's taking the turtles when they shouldn't. Someone asked if there's an issue with selling turtles to other countries. So we don't have a huge poaching problem here in BC. So our turtles aren't often, we know of, taken from the wild to be sold in other countries. But it is something that we need to make sure that we keep an eye on. Someone is wondering what turtle poop looks like. It kind of, when they're tiny turtles, it kind of looks like a grain of rice. Yeah. Brown rice. When they get bigger, it just looks like bigger brown rice. And someone asked if we're worried about climate change to impact the turtles. Definitely. So when we talk about temperature affecting whether we get males or females from a clutch, that makes a big difference for these turtles. So if it's getting warmer all the time and we're getting really warm falls during their incubation or late summers during their incubation, that could make us skew our population towards females. Which means that we will get potentially more breeding. But if we don't have enough males, that could be a problem. So we might end up with a situation where we have to incubate more turtles to become males than females at a certain population. So that's something that we can do by taking those eggs in and incubating them artificially, as we can kind of skew those populations to a little bit more towards a natural ratio. Which will be helpful, especially since they are so long-lived. It's not something that we would necessarily have to do very intensely to have a big effect. So just releasing a few extra males can make a big difference. And someone asked, why are snails cute? I don't know. They got those big googly eyes that stick off the top of their head.
I have pet snails.
You have pet snails? What kind of snails?
We're not sure, but we get them from the wild. They're still
Oh, you get them from your yard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same with us, and our grove snails are doing really, 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 really well.
Good. Happy snails are good snails.
Ours are very tiny.
Grove snails are invasive, so we're not going to let them go.
Yeah, a lot of the snails we have here are invasive. We have some really cool native snails, though. They're really big. They get really big and red. Someone asked, where is the facility that we work with the turtles and frogs? So I work for Wildlife Preservation Canada, and we work in partnership with Greater Vancouver Zoo. So that's where we house our facility for the turtles, the frogs, and we have another project on butterflies. So they're our facility partner. If you're ever at the zoo, we're at the very, very back, down by where the bobcat is. And that's where we have all of our tubs set up. Sometimes people think we look like we're fish farming, but that's where all the tubs for the frogs are. And right now our turtles are in a very special quarantine area because they need to be warm all the time. And our building is getting renovated. So right now we can't see the turtles. Sometimes we have rescue turtles out at the frog area, so the members of the public can see our rescue turtles, but not the tiny baby ones because they need to stay extra warm. Is it hard to keep turtles as a pet? It can be. Sometimes it's hard for us to look after them, and we have a lot of vets and a lot of people who know what they're doing to look after them. One of the main things that people run into with turtles as a pet is that they're pretty destructive if you have try and build them a nice home. They like to eat all the plants you put in there. They eat the gravel. They're pretty stinky. Not gonna lie, they're pretty stinky. So they have to clean their water quite a lot. And they need a real big lot of room. So usually when people have a really big, nice aquarium, they usually want to put some tropical fish in it and lots of cool things. But if you have a turtle, you can have a huge tank and one turtle in it because you want them to fight and you don't want them to eat everything, and they need to have lots of room. So that usually makes them not super desirable as pets. And they also live a really, really long time. So I was mentioning that my dad used to see them as gifts, as prizes at the PNE. And those turtles that he had when he was a kid, they could still be around now. That's a really long time to have a pet. And you think of how many times you move if you're a kid now and you move out or you go to university and you can't take your turtle with you. So it's a really long time. Yo, someone's their turtle for 20 years. Good for you. Yeah. So turtles can be good pets, but they're a lot of commitment. So if you think a dog is a lot of commitment, a turtle is a lot of commitment. And they're not super great at cuddles. Not really great. Kind of hard. They're definitely stinky. Good. Someone agrees with me. Do pet turtles carry salmonella? They definitely, a lot of them do. So turtles have a lot of gut bacteria that they carry with them at all times. And they're usually not very good at fighting it off. So when turtles have a lot of germs, we call them germs for that reason, is that they carry a lot of things around with them in their gut that they just don't ever get rid of. So if a turtle has ever eaten anything with salmonella before, which it probably has, then it probably has a lot of salmonella in its digestive tract. And when it poops in its water and gets that on its skin, it will carry salmonella. So yes, a lot of turtles have salmonella. E. coli is another one. Excuse me, that's pretty common for them to have. Cryptosporidium, which is a parasite that is very difficult to get rid of in them and very difficult to get rid of it. Yeah, turtles are pretty germy. Yeah. Do turtles eat their own eggs sometimes? So sometimes the baby turtles, when they hatch in the nest, they'll eat the egg that's left over. They'll kind of chomp on it. And they don't really eat each other's eggs though, because the eggs are on land and turtles need to be in the water to eat. But red-eared sliders will often dig up the nests of painted turtles. So painted turtles nest first, and then red-eared sliders nest second. So when the red-eared sliders come to dig their hole for their nest, sometimes they find that a painted turtle has already laid there, and then they'll take the eggs out and crush them and then lay their nest in the same spot. So they don't eat the eggs, but they do sometimes destroy eggs of other species of turtle.
What are your turtles' names?
These turtles' names, I don't know these ones' names. So they all do have a name, but we have 250 of them right now. So I can't remember all of their names. But they do have names and they have numbers too, so that we can keep track of them in our big long lists. But we always need extra names. So maybe if you guys want to write down some names and send them to us, because I can't often think of so many names every year. There's only so many that I can name Andrea. Well, someone had a snail that lived 2 years. That's awesome. I don't know how long snails are supposed to live, but that seems pretty good.
You should name some Andrea Jr.
Tom is a good name. We'll use that one. Someone asked how many varieties. You mean different types of frogs or turtles? In BC, we only have one species of native turtle, the painted turtle. We used to have another called the pond turtle, but it hasn't been seen in over 50 years. So we consider it extirpated. So it still exists in Washington, Oregon, and California, but it's not in BC anymore. So hopefully we'll be able to bring them back.
Why can't you just go to Washington, Oregon, and maybe collect one or two, try to get them used to their new habitat and maybe breed them?
That's a good idea, and that's probably what we'll do. But right now they're endangered in Washington and Oregon too. So we have partners down there that are working on doing that. They're breeding them and protecting their nests. And then once they have enough that they feel comfortable sharing, then we'll bring some up here. Yeah.
So thank you. So thank you.
Okay, bye. If someone's leaving, thank you.
Oh, yeah, somebody's leaving. So thank you.
Want to say bye? Wave bye.
Hold on.
Say bye.
Bye.
Well, thanks so much, Annie.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys.
So good for everybody to ask so many questions.
Bye.
Thank you for giving me some names for the turtles.
Our next Explore Day is going to be April 6th, and it's going to be all about snakes.
Ooh,
Stay
exciting.
tuned for that one.
Put video when they wait and say thank you.
Bye.